So, roll call, please. I don't think I heard you. Is your mic on?
Please note for the record all council members are present with the exception of Terry O'Connell.
Okay, who was on medical leave. Okay, thank you. Then we have any changes to the agenda before we adopt it?
I have a suggestion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
If we close in memory of Nancy Mortz, and a long-time Brisbane resident.
That's Mortz's wife?
Yeah. Oh. Nancy passed away about 2 weeks ago, I guess, on Saturday. And in Valley Springs for long illness. And also a friend of mine who's not from Brisbane, but his name is Pinay Tofa. And I'll give you the spelling afterwards.
Okay. That's good. You want to move adoption of the agenda as amended?
Oh, one other.
Oh, one other.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got also the Millbrae Vice Mayor.
Nadia Hollover.
Nadia Hollover,
right,
who passed away at a young age of 54. And I've known Nadia since 1999, so
wow.
she'll be missed.
Okay.
And with that, I move approval of the agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We got an agenda, and we have two presentations. The first one from Matt Franklin, that was right there, from the Mid-Peninsula Housing Corporation, and we have some basic materials, and I'm sure you have PowerPoint and presentation already, and we're all ears.
I think it's probably a good idea to read his bio. What do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
You know him personally, so why don't you?
Okay, well, Matt joined Mid-Peninsula Housing Corporation as president in July 2008, and Matt is responsible for the strategic direction of Mid-Peninsula and oversees all areas of the company, including real estate development, property and asset management, corporate administration, and resident services. Matt came to MidPen from an appointed post as executive director of the San Francisco's Mayor's Office of Housing, where he coordinated all city housing policy and oversaw the financing for 3,500 new affordable rental units and the compliance monitoring for 24,000 existing affordable units. Matt's previous roles include Director of California's Department of Housing and Community Development, where he was the governor's lead housing policy advisor, Vice President of Emerging Markets for Wells Fargo Home Mortgage, where he managed multi-billion-dollar programs producing more than 100,000 loans nationwide for low, moderate income, and minority customers, in senior positions in the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, under President Clinton. Matt currently serves on the board of directors of the National Housing Trust, California Housing Consortium, and the nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. He held previous board posts on the California Housing Finance Agency and California Tax Credit Allocation Committee. Matt received his Master's of Public Policy from John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University and his Bachelor's in Political Science from Colgate University. He also attended the London School of Economics and Political Sciences. That's kind of up your line, right?
Yeah, that's the
So with that introduction, I'm out of breath, and
okay.
Welcome back.
Quite an extensive bio, and another one of our honorable Easterners has moved west.
That's right.
So it's all yours.
To get him to send the short version next time, but thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor and Councilman Conway, for having us. Councilman Lentz for having me tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity. What I'd like to do is move through this fairly quickly, but then, and really engage in maybe some dialogue and discussion. What I'd like to do is take a minute to talk about the model that MidPen is pursuing in terms of developing affordable housing. It's a model that I think is not unique. It's emblematic of where the industry has gone. And it's one that I think is very, very different from where we've been in terms of public housing historically as a nation. And then a little bit about the need in the county, and then also the current situation in terms of financing, which you're all very familiar with, the challenges, and hopefully we can talk about some of those solutions. Just a little bit about Mid-Penn. I think you're pretty familiar with it, but we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization. We're based in Foster City here in San Mateo County. We currently develop in 10 counties. We go from sort of Monterey to in San Benito in the south to Napa and Solano in the north, but our home is really here in San Mateo, and much of our portfolio is. We've been around since 1970, and we've developed over 7,000 homes in that period of time, including right now 640 units under construction. We also self-manage anything that we build. It's very important to us. We don't see that as a business line. We see it as an expression of our mission, that if you want to create a great environment for your residents, you need to employ everybody down to the maintenance person. It also is very important in terms of being a good neighbor. If there's ever any issues with our property, I don't love if it gets to this situation, but I do like that people feel comfortable calling me if they need to. And they've got a lot of folks on the ground that work for us who can address any neighborly concerns. And then we invest over $5 million a year in resident services. I'll talk more about this, but really see the housing as a platform for life change and a way to help folks advance their well-being, their career, their kids' education. That's the part that I think is really the most exciting to us as an organization. Just to take a step back, though, a little bit about the model. It's based in many ways on some of the failures of public housing. So it used to be in the 40s, 50s, and 60s that the way that we as a nation tried to invest in affordable housing for low-income folks was through the federal government. Literally federal money appropriated, federal rules, literally sort of managed by regulation out of Washington, D.C. Having worked at HUD, I can take the liberty to say that we didn't do that very well, I don't think. And some of the real failures were, these are some of the worst, and of course out here it's not quite as bad, but these kind of emblematic of the failures, some of these developments you see here from Chicago, but really poor design, poor quality of construction, often discriminatory zoning, kind of putting the housing actually in the worst part of town or cut off with a highway, cutting off access to neighborhood amenities. In my view, one of the big issues was an over-concentration of the non-working poor. Mm-hmm. Personally, and as an organization, we understand that folks need public assistance at different times, but if you end up with a whole community of the non-working poor, you don't have working folks to be role models for the young people. You don't have that network to get your first job. It really is a detriment to the community if you want to create a healthy environment. And then HUD was just really poor managers and didn't provide the resident services that we've come to learn are so key to success. So our model is very different. And again, we don't have a corner on this. It's the money at the federal level has really shifted away from public housing and for all the new development that goes through organizations like Mid-Penn. And they've done that intentionally. And it's because they feel that we've really learned the lessons from these failures of the past. So the first is the site near neighborhood amenities. We won't build anything now if it's not close to transportation, close to schools, close to parks, so that our residents really have the best of the amenities. We believe strongly that great design matters, that if you want to create a great community, it's a necessary, not sufficient, but a necessary condition to have a great built environment. You have to start with a really good physical condition with good design. We feel strongly that mixed income works. So anything we're developing now in the family, about 65% of our units are family developments, and over 80% of the heads of households in those units are in the active workforce. They're low wage, typically earning maybe between 25 and 50% of 25 to 50,000 a year for a family of four, but much more than if they were just on public assistance, which is kind of in the 15 to 17,000 a year range. Believe strongly that quality property and asset management is important. We're the long-term owner. Anything we build, we're going to be in for the long haul. See part of our job to be the steward of that asset. And then service-enriched housing. Again, we invest $5 million a year. That's in academically based after-school programs for the youth in our developments, wellness programs for the seniors designed to help them age in place, financial literacy and wealth-building programs, vocational programs. the basic discussion we have is you've got this opportunity of affordable housing. How do you want to use it? How do you want to use this to advance your well-being in material ways? And it's a really exciting journey we can go on with our residents. Give you a little bit of a feel for what we've been doing here in the county. I'll flip through some of these developments fairly quickly. This is our most recent. It's a 109-unit family development on the El Camino right next to South San Francisco High School. Fairly typical of what we've been doing up and down the El Camino and in other parts of the county. Pretty high density. This is about 60 units to the acre. It's a mixed use. There's 5,700 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor to activate the commercial corridor. The city said that they really, though, wanted to leverage this site. It's so transit rich, a lot of bus routes coming through there. We have 2 BART stations, one in either direction, less than a mile away. So we really have a pretty aggressive density here, but then our challenge is to make this a highly livable environment. And we really feel that we've done this. This building has 2 interior courtyards, over 3,000 square feet of common area for the community to gather, for us to deliver our service programs. This is Peninsula Station. This is also on the El Camino, right across from the Hillsdale Shopping Center in San Mateo, right next to where the Borders used to be. This was a former tire store site. Backs up to the Caltrans line and is less than a quarter mile from the Hillsdale Caltrans stop. Again, a pretty aggressive density. Another family development, also has commercial on the ground floor, and has really turned out nicely. This is the former City of San Mateo Police Station site, which is under construction right now. It's on Delaware, essentially right where 92 and 101 meet. And that's a 60-unit family development. And then this is down in the coast, Half Moon Village. This is a former county-owned site that had 6 kind of obsolete cottages right on Main Street, just a little bit down from the main commercial area of Main Street, but walking distance, where we're building 160 units as part of a senior campus that the county has planned. All of these are just in incredible demand. If we go back to the 636 we just leased up about in South San Francisco, we leased this up just about 9 months ago, and we had over 2,300 applications for these 109 units.
How many?
2,300.
Whoa.
Yeah. And Peninsula Station was pretty similar, 68 units, and I think it was more like 2,100. So the need is really, really overwhelming. Just to put a little dimension on that, we did a study that the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation funded. And it is pretty compelling data. What you see here first is this slide shows, across the top there, it shows the monthly rent, and it kind of has 2 different bars. So if you look at that up to $749, and the blue and the light blue and the dark blue is San Mateo County, and the green is Santa Clara County. What that first graph shows is the need. So it shows that there's about 42,000 households in the county who can only afford to pay $750 or less in rent. And the kind of industry calculation is to say that no more than a third of your gross income should go towards your housing expense. So about 42,000 households can only afford that $750, and yet the dark blue shows how many units are supplied that rent at that level. So it's about 6,000. So 42,000 households can only afford that. There's only about 6,000 units. If you go to the next level, 750, up to effectively $1,000 a month, you can see that it's more like a little under 30,000 households can afford that, and there's about 8,000 or 9,000 units. So who are these folks? Well, if you look in San Mateo County, the income that you need to afford the average 2-bedroom rent, is, you can see it on the right-hand side here, is $82,400 a year. And again, the green is Santa Clara and the blue is San Mateo. So your average public school teacher in the county is earning a little under, what are we looking at there? So that's a little under $60,000 a year. Your average EMT is earning about $50,000 a year. Your bank teller about 31 or 2,000, retail 25,000. All of these are working folks. These are really the folks that kind of form the backbone of the local economy. And you can see that the average apartment rent is out of reach for them. And in fact, if you look at the kind of forecast materials coming out of the state, the State Department of Employment Development estimates that over the next 10 years, from 2008 to 2018, they look at where the jobs are going to be created in the valley. So this is San Mateo and Santa Clara County together. And if you combine, and it shows the salary range across the bottom, if you combine those first two sets of bars, and so you go up to $50,000 a year, this data shows that over 2/3 of the job growth in San Mateo and Santa Clara County is going to pay $50,000 a year or less. So it was really a striking chart to me the first time I saw it. We hear so much about the high-tech jobs, many of which, of course, pay extremely high salaries. But 2/3 of the job growth is going to be paying $50,000 a year or less over the next 10 years. So in the absence of supplying this housing, we all know these folks are, driving from Tracy, increasing our CO2 emissions and kind of spoiling our environment, creating traffic jams, or they're living here doubled and tripled up, or with 70 or 80% of their income going towards their housing expense. So at the end of the day, I feel like this report, no matter how one might feel about the moral or the civic or other aspects of this issue, to me, this report really shows that fundamentally this is an economic issue. It's one that if you want to have a healthy local economy, you have to find a home for these workers. And it's one of the reasons that the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, for instance, when they survey their CEOs, for the last 10 years, they put housing in the top 3, the affordability of housing in the top 3 of their issues of concern. Because they know this, that eventually, if you don't plan, if you don't have adequate housing stock for this workforce, that the local economy is just going to sort of start to fall in on itself. So what do we do about it? Well, you're very familiar, and you all have been active to try to manage the decline of redevelopment. As you know, that was, by law, 20% of those funds were set aside. That was over $1 billion a year for affordable housing. And the Bay Area was particularly active in that. We're only a little bit over 20% of the population of the state, but we're over 25% of the redevelopment funds because cities and counties were particularly active in raising that. There's a bit of a history of general obligation bonds at the state level for affordable housing. The most recent was in 2006, a $2.8 billion bond, Prop 1C, but that money has all been spent. And then the federal funding has just kind of gotten hammered at HUD. So what we're looking at is a number of trying to identify solutions on a number of different levels. And I tell you that my personal enthusiasm for these go in this order: the local, the regional, the state, and then the federal, as far as where I think the greatest sort of prospects lie. The county, as you may be aware, has agreed to put some of the redevelopment money that came to them back into housing. So they've dedicated now $13.4 million in low mod fund revenue that they captured from cities that came to the county as part of the county tax formula. They're putting back into the housing fund. So that's money at the Department of Housing at the county right now that's available, and they're eager for city partners to come and sort of access and apply. They're looking for some sort of match, whether it's land or other funding in the deal. And they're particularly interested where cities like you all have been working strategically to try to assemble, try to get things together, but sort of got caught midstream. And they specifically talked about that when they had the debate and the allocation of these funds. And then there's some cities, Foster City has done a similar allocation, and San Mateo allocated what they had. Bigger than that, I think, though, is the opportunity for housing impact fees and inclusionary housing programs at the local level. So the inclusionaries, you may be aware, has run into some legal challenges. And really the best way to work around that is to have just a really simple housing impact fee. The economic argument is clear. as you build luxury homes in your community, or really build any type of homes at all, you're creating the demand for local jobs, which is creating the demand for more housing. There's a really solid economic argument for the nexus between the fee and the development that's occurring. And many cities in the county and in surrounding counties are hiring economic and analytics firms to help them sort of set fees at an appropriate level. We're seeing just a ton of investment capital coming into the Bay Area, a lot of residential development. So I really think the time is right to take a look at these housing impact options. At the regional level, we're having a lot of talk. There's been some great coalition building over the last couple decades between the transportation, the housing, and the environmental communities. And yeah, I'm sure you're all tracking, and I know that Councilman Conway is through CCAG on the Bay Area plan, which of course is driven in some by looking at where the future housing patterns are going to be. So the transportation, environmental, sort of public open space, and housing community is talking about the possibility of a 9-county revenue measure. So imagine some sort of a tax measure that would be dedicated towards basically implementing the Bay Area plan. So some money will go towards transportation, money will go towards housing to be developed near transit nodes, and towards preservation of open space. Assemblyman Mullen of South San Francisco is carrying a bill that would give the authority for the 9-county Bay Area to pursue those measures, and that is AB 431. And then at the state level, we do have SB 391. Senator DeSaulnier out of Contra Costa County, who's chair of Senate Housing Committee, is carrying this. This would create a $75 document fee, a recording fee that would raise up to $500 million a year for affordable housing. And then there's a few other interesting bits here. Assemblymember Perez is looking to reprogram some bond money that was for mortgages for veterans into rental housing. I think the thought, I guess, that I would end with is that, you know, while the landscape looks much different, and while the funding is not, you know, as clear, we are seeing a lot of cities in the county continue to move developments forward. So we're working with a couple other smaller cities in the county who had acquired public sites that have great potential, but that were really always contemplated to be part of an assemblage with some neighboring sites. So if you can sort of tie up that neighboring land, and if you have a little bit of money to sort of match, or it doesn't have to be a direct match, I don't think it'll end up being a little bit more the signaling of the commitment of the city for the county to come in with some funding. We're seeing the ability to still put together developments. And in fact, the sort of silver lining is that the competition for that county money, the competition for the low-income housing tax credits, which are distributed through the state treasurer's office, all the other sources that we go leverage to put a deal together is actually quite a bit less because of the redevelopment. So if you have some assets like land or things you've been able to hold on to, you know, we found that if you just sort of keep chugging on it, you can still put deals together in the current environment. So with that, I'd invite any questions or comments. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Very interesting. I know that Clark has been really very interested in having your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's mentioned some aspects of what you presented on other occasions. So you want to make sure that there are certain things that you want to put forward?
Well, just the thing that I think on educating not only the public officials but the public itself on what is affordable housing, because I think the stigma is people think it's the Section 8. You termed it as, you know, people that don't work.
Right.
You know, and really the majority of the folks that are using public housing, at least in San Mateo County, are working individuals.
Right.
They're just on the low rung of the scale.
Right.
And if you recall when we had the person here from, what's the name of the, I forget the, HIP.
Kate Comfort
Horror, yeah, that the average one-bedroom unit cost in San Mateo County is over $1,900. I mean, your scale showed that you need to make, you know, for a family of four, $82,000.
Right.
just to afford that. And so, I think the point is really point on, and it's really reaching out and educating, the public and the public officials, because I think a lot of public officials have that same stigma. They think that it's Section 8 housing, and people in the community think it's that, but it's really not.
Why don't you explain what Section 8 housing is?
That I can't explain.
We use Section 8 on some of our developments, but what we would do is so what Section 8 is rental assistance, and so I think it's become a little bit of a proxy for the old style housing.
Yeah.
And I think the Section 8
have a metaphorical ring to it.
Yeah. Well, I think what it can conjure up is the old public housing days. And again, I do feel that one of the mistakes they made was this overconcentration of the non-working poor. Section 8 is rental assistance that HUD can provide, and the way they provide it these days and the way we typically use it is for maybe just a percentage of units, maybe 20% in a development. It has the ability, the household pays a third of their income, whatever it is. So there's sort of no minimum income, and then HUD pays the difference between that and market to the landlord. And so it can be a helpful financing tool, and it does help you go lower on the income spectrum, which again, we do in our developments, but we do it in a way where it's integrated with a lot of working folks as well. And for those units, there's sort of a minimum income you need to pay the rent there. And so it ends up being more of a mixed income community, which is, of course, how many of the communities in the county are formed sort of naturally. And I think creates a really healthy mix.
And you can legally make those kind of allocations?
Yeah. So what they would do is they give us the Section 8, it's sort of tied to units, and maybe for 20% of the units. And then we'd have a little different targeting, a little higher income level for some of the other units, so you end up with a mix.
Yeah, I didn't have any questions. I was just saying, I was really impressed with the presentation when I saw it at CCAG. That's why I thought it was important to really invite Matt up here. And
Yeah, I'm glad that you did, Clark. We've been having quite a few discussions recently about affordable housing. And there seems to be, I think, a growing consent from the council that this is important. And you chimed on the importance of how it plays into economic prosperity. And a lot of people don't think of housing being a major part of economic development. And if we don't have folks being able to afford to live where they work, you risk your economic infrastructure.
That's right.
And so, I'm glad that's the way that people are thinking. And then of course you guys, it seems like you're taking it to right into the heart of the development itself. The self-management part, and and providing those other pieces of the puzzle that make one's life complete. That development in South San Francisco, for example, with having some child care and teaching kids and some of those other things that you talked about. You just talked about good design. And so how do you ensure that you can implement good design? Because I think that's also part of the stigma. Is just the way that a building looks. And it can have all the great things inside it. But if it looks crummy on the outside, then people aren't going to be happy with it. You want people to embrace it. You want it to be, just seamless in your community.
Well, typically it's a lot of really working hand in glove with the city, because we work with some of the best architects in the Bay Area, so we can bring in great professionals, but a really great design is one that fits in the community and it's in the context of the community, and that so we do all sorts of outreach in the community. We'll have design and sort of building and site planning charrettes with the community to get input, and then work very closely with our planning department partners as well. And the concept we have, because more and more we're doing these dense developments because they're so transit rich and we want to take advantage of them, And the idea we have when we're at the table is that we want to have every inch of that development have maximum utility for the families, so that you just really put the pressure on yourself to be just really thoughtful about every aspect of it. And then the other thing is a lot of community space. So right now we're averaging about 3,000 square feet, either internal and indoor and outdoor gathering space for the community, so that you really try to build community. Big community centers where folks in the surrounding community can come in as well, so that folks are really integrated and really become active in sort of civic engagement of their surrounding community.
Mm. Now, are all the types of housing that you create, are they just rental, or?
So we do predominantly rental.
Rental, okay.
Yeah.
And then, that rent that you're taking in, is it covering,
it covers our operations.
Sure.
Yeah, but sort of just barely.
Just barely.
So we get, about 80% of the financing for one of our developments is some form of public subsidy. And we might put a conventional mortgage of maybe 10 to 30% of the development cost. So we have this very low-cost capital model, and there's a regulatory agreement that runs with the land. We agree we're going to serve a certain income level, and then there's kind of an imputed rent of no more than 30% of their gross income. So well below market rate rent. Cheap capital, below market rate rent. We have enough to operate the building, to be properly insured, to support our services programs, but then there's typically very little cash flow left over, kind of by design.
Okay. And so this money that you get to build these developments, is it like an all-cash type? You collect all the money, you build it, and you don't have a mortgage? Or
Well, it comes in a variety of forms. So the city and counties are often the most important funders. They're the first money in. They're typically maybe 15 to 20% of the total development cost. That's usually structured as debt, but functions like a grant, maybe 3% interest, typically deferred so long as we do what we said we were going to do. You said you were going to serve families at this certain income level and you maintain the building. Maybe a share of the, it's not uncommon to have maybe 50% of the surplus cash, a residual receipt note. And then we use a program called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, which is a corporate tax credit that we can compete for, and if we win them, we syndicate those and sell those to corporations who it raises equity for us. It's a very deep subsidy. It can raise as much as 60% of the development cost. And the corporate investor becomes the 99% limited partner. We're the 1% managing general, so we still run the partnership. They're in the program for about a 10-year period while those credits are paid out, and then they exit the partnership. And then there's, at various times, there's various state programs. There was Prop 1C we could go leverage. And there's still a few of those around, but there's not much of that money left at present. But if SB 391 were to pass, then we'd be back in business there.
Yeah.
So it ends up being this fairly complicated kind of 5 or 6 layer of financing. At the end of the day, though, the bulk of it is some form of public money that's kind of soft debt.
Sure. So have you had an opportunity to see what is available in Brisbane?
Well, I don't know about what's available, but we did have we had an opportunity to walk around the town a little bit and to see things, and I'm aware of some of the land that you own, the public land that you own, which looks like it's very well situated, and we haven't really dug down on any specific opportunity or anything of that variety, though.
Sure. How do you partner with Hart, or do you?
With HIP? Oh, with Hart. I'm sorry, with Hart. Yes. So Hart has $1 million in 636, the South San Francisco deal.
Yeah.
Get back to that. So they have a loan fund that's helpful, tends to be pretty strategically used. Actually, Penn Station's a better example. Penn Station was a deal that we were entitled with in 2009, which was when Governor Schwarzenegger, we ran the state. Remember when the state kind of went broke and they quit issuing bonds and everything just kind of ground to a halt? And so we had some state money that was committed by the state, but they couldn't deliver. it was the spring of '09. We wanted to start construction. Construction costs were incredibly low. It was a great time to be building. And Hart came in along with the county and the city and helped bridge a $4 million state commitment. So we knew the state was good for, but they literally were all frozen up in their financing because of the downturn and a variety of other things. So, they tend to play kind of strategic, small money but big impact kind of roles in our deals. And most everything we do in the county, they have a bit of a role in.
Sure. All right. Yeah, that was excellent presentation.
All right.
So you're structured as a nonprofit?
We are. Yeah, we're a 501c3. We consider ourselves a...
I don't know what that is now from recent news.
Those were about the C4s, which are the political
Well, 501c3s, that was the...
Some of those were threes.
3 or 4.
Yeah, no, that's right. But so we're a mission-driven organization, and everything we do is affordable. Everything we do is really designed towards creating affordable homes and opportunity for our residents. We live, though, on what we earn through our development fees and our property management fees and our operations of our buildings. So it ends up being a really fun and kind of interesting mix of a mission-driven organization that needs to be run like a business.
The company, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a big operation at this point.
So do you partner with Habitat for Humanity, or they do different things?
They really do different things. I have a lot of respect for that group and know the leadership there well and think they do a great job. So their bread and butter is more affordable home ownership and pretty small developments. So they do, maybe 5 to 10 homes at a time. They don't use most of the financing sources we use, although they do typically have a little bit of local money. But they have a different model by way of volunteers and a lot of kind of in-kind help to develop.
Equity.
Yeah, sweat equity, right. So, whereas we do mostly new construction or acquisition rehab of existing rental, a typical deal for us has kind of been maybe 40 to 100 unit size. Sometimes we can do smaller. So they play kind of a different role than we do.
Okay, let's see. Carolyn, you had a question? Carolyn's on our planning commission.
It's pretty wonderful to hear about this program. I'm quite excited.
Okay.
I have some questions, and one of them is, as the building gets older and needs repairs, or if there's construction defects, is that set up to manage these kinds of considerations? I know you're cutting it pretty close, but the upkeep and maintenance seems to be vital, and sometimes construction is faulty and defective.
It's a very good question. So when we pro forma development just like a private developer would, and hopefully like the best private developers, not the worst. And so we plan for payments into reserve for replacement and operating reserves as well, and we have an in-house team that's out doing capital needs assessments of every property every year in order to tell us how much we need to be reserving. So we did, I think, about $8 million in capital improvements on our portfolio last year, and every year we're reinvesting, just like you would in your home, just so that it, stays in top condition.
How do you choose contractors? Are they from the local community, or do you try more modular building? I was just wondering how that is done.
Sure. So we do use local contractors for sure. I mean, anymore in the contracting business, the subs may be coming from around the South Bay, but everyone we use is local. We are usually working with a city or county with some source of funds that has a prevailing wage requirement, so we typically pay prevailing wage. We've looked at module. We've recently just done a study on a deal in Fremont where we took a really hard look at modular and looked side by side on the savings. And to be honest, the savings we saw in the module were relatively slight. It was about 3 months of construction period, which is not nothing, but it had the disadvantage of local jobs. We do value that when we're working with general contractors. So we had sort of told ourselves it needed to be a pretty big delta of dollar savings to be worth it. And so far we haven't encountered that yet. But we're interested in that technology and are continuing to track on it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming in and making a presentation.
Yeah, I think that speaks for all of us. But I wanted to make just one observation that actually Clark has made earlier, and we made as a part of our response to the One Plan Bay area, is that the focus seems to always be on somehow or other government coming up with funds to provide affordable housing. And they're only looking at kind of one side of the equation, because the other side of the equation is people aren't being paid enough. And so this whole issue of stagnation of incomes, growing income inequality, I mean, that's a big part of the problem. And yet that doesn't seem to be the part of the equation that's addressed very vigorously in the whole public policy arena, and certainly not by the private sector. And you mentioned some of the CEOs who are thinking about this problem, but what are they coming up with? And so I mean, they want somebody else to do it, and yet they got trillions of dollars sitting overseas. So there's a little bit of concern there that there's a lack of fair distribution of responsibility for this problem. I really appreciate what you're doing, but you're dealing in an environment in which you got a lot of cards stacked against you. So that's kind of more of a comment.
Good one.
Any other comments, questions?
Thank you, Matt.
Where are we? City manager.
Yeah, we had an opportunity to talk beforehand. I think one of the things I'm not sure how clear it came through in Matt's presentation, but I thought it was really relevant to our situation, is that although the number of units that typically constitute a project for them may be in the 40 or 50 or more numbers, it doesn't necessarily have to be one contiguous site. It could be a couple sites, as long as I believe a quarter mile is the radius. So that might be something for us to think about. It gives us a little more flexibility in terms of how we might potentially put something together.
We're going to have him work with staff to throw together some scenarios, just see where we land in the equation, just so that we kind of get an educated guess on how we rate, and would we be able to qualify for some of these programs? And they're gracious enough to be able to go ahead and do that for us. So, and then staff will bring that forward once we kind of get something.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities for Brisbane to implement some of these new ways of thinking in regards to affordable housing. We have the charrette coming up, hopefully, I guess maybe sometime at the end of the year or maybe the beginning of next year, where we're looking at the industrial park, the village. How does your economic engine fit with the rest of your community? How do you make it stronger? And how do you connect our two residential areas, the Ridge and central Brisbane? So there's lots of opportunities to provide that education to the community, and then like you're saying, Clark, do we qualify? Are there ways to get assistance outside of Brisbane? Because you do need to have assistance from the outside. But of course, we also want to make sure that what we do implement is coming from us. So, I'm excited to be in this position to work with folks like you and the council and staff. So Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Clark, for doing this.
Great. So let's see what we can do.
Okay.
All right, great, very much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Okay, so we have the second presentation having to do with, from my point of view, transparency for the community on our comprehensive financial report. And we're happy to have the Deputy Finance Director give the presentation.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Council. And as it says, what the heck is a CAFR? And tonight you're going to learn how to pronounce all the wonderful accounting acronyms that we use all the time. A CAFR is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which comes out after we've had our annual legal audit. Let me see if I can figure this out. And to set the tone for tonight's presentation, I included this cartoon that I found about a week ago. And this information is so exciting, I feel obliged to tone it down a little with these boring slides.
You found this on Stuart's desk, huh?
Clark, have you ever seen my desk? Can't find anything on my desk. You can't find things on Stuart's desk. So the CAFR structure is very similar. You can pick up any city's comprehensive annual financial report and you'll find it's pretty much the same. And that's because the National Council of Governmental Accounting and GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, have all these rules, regulations, and statements that we have to follow to perform our jobs. And every CAFR must have an introductory section, a financial section, and a statistical section. In our introductory section, we have the table of contents, the letter of transmittal, which is management's summary of the city for the past year, the organizational chart, principal officials, and the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association Award, if it's applied for and awarded. We have saved money by not applying for it for about the last 5 years, but we've earned it in the past, and we create our CAFR in such a way that we could receive the award if we chose to apply. Our financial section is the Independent Auditor's Report, the Management Discussion and Analysis, most commonly called MD&A, and the Basic Financials. Again, the format for the Auditor's Report is proscribed by law. It is rather boring, but what I wanted to make sure that everyone knows is that what the audit report says in the auditors is they're evaluating the city's financial reporting and not assessing its economic well-being. And what they're attesting to is that it's reasonable, it's got fair presentation, and there's no materiality. So when you read the auditor's report, you want to check your third paragraph, because that's your key paragraph, and it always tells you whether it's an unqualified, which is what you want, or a qualified opinion. And that means if it's an unqualified opinion, then you've met all of their standards. And they have a whole set of legalese that they've got to follow also when they're doing this.
What's that term? Materiality?
Materiality.
Okay, what's that?
It is that there's no major differences. There's always small things that aren't reported accurately, but if they're looking for anything large that would impact the truthfulness of the financial report. Now, in the MD&A, it highlights the past year, it summarizes the financials, which is your balance sheet and your income statements, and it discusses the different types of funds. And then our basic financials are the statements, the notes, and the required supplementary information. In the statistical section, and they expanded that when they went to compress it a few years ago to include 4 more pages, and it has the financial trends, the revenue capacity, the debt capacity, demographic and economic information, and operating information. And these reports generally cover a 10-year span on most of the reports so that you really get a good idea of the trending up, down, for all the different aspects of it. and the statistical section is not audited. They just attest that the numbers match what you showed in the rest of the report. Now, I'm going to tell you how I read annual reports, and this is not just the CAFR, but any private annual report. I always start with the notes, because that's where the nitty-gritty is. And by the nitty-gritty, I mean it's the background to what the numbers can't tell you. And I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. Then after I read the notes, I go and check the transmittal letter and the MD&A. After that, I look at the numbers, the balance sheet and income statement, and then I review the statistical section for the trending. This is what I meant by the nitty-gritty. This is an example of one of our notes for insurance, because on the financial statements, there's not a whole lot of numbers. It doesn't tell you what we're covering or how we've come to this. So the notes tell you when you got into something that we're part of, and for insurance, that we're part of a joint powers authority, that, you know, just what our liability is and how we cover each of our risks. And you'll find that for all the different sections. So to tell you what's in our notes, they start on page 51 and run for 50 pages. I checked. The routine stuff information is on notes 1, 2, and 3. It's pretty boring stuff because notes 1, 2, and 3 generally don't change from year to year, because it's the accounting policies, your budgetary policies, and your cash and investment, which is really what we're authorized to invest in, what your credit risk is, what your concentration risk is, what your interest rate risk is. Note 4 explains the money moved between funds. That's your, and again, this is accounting terms, due to, due from, which means some money is due to another fund from another fund, and that's usually an obligation that's due within a year. You have your advances, which are longer than a year, and then we have the budgeted transfers that we do every year to pay bills, such as when we transfer money to pay debt service. Note 5 is the detail on loans receivable. This is bridge housing, our loans to Habitat Humanity people, and the loans to some of the staff. Loan 6 is capital assets, where we have both governmental and business-type assets. 7 is the net pension asset, which is our prepaid PERS, which is the bond we bonded for PERS to prepay it. It's considered an asset that decreases over time until it's paid off. Note 8 tells you everything you ever wanted to know about long-term debt, our bonds and our leases. Note 9, there's a lot of notes, is about the net asset and fund balance as required by GASB 54. It used to be, before GASB 54, we had restricted and unrestricted fund balance. Now we have non-spendable, committed, assigned, and unassigned. And they changed it because GASB wanted every city to have more or less the same standards for how they were looking at their reserves. Note 10 is about our PERS retirement benefits. 11 is our other post-employment benefits, otherwise known as OPEB, and our OPEB is retiree health and the stipend. Note 12 is insurance and workers' comp detail. Note 13 is commitments and contingent liabilities, which is our encumbrances and any construction that we're committed to at year's end. Note 14 breaks up the utility fund financial statements, and we have to do this because GVMID is a special district, and the state requires special districts to be reported annually, and they want to see the background for it. So this is our way of, rather than create a separate report for GVMID, we break down it in one of the notes. Note 15 is everything you always wanted to know about redevelopment dissolution and where it all went. Note 16 tells you about DWR leaving the city. They call it a concentration risk. And we've been including this information in the notes for the last 2 years. And then note 17 is anything major that happens after an audit. Last year we were refinancing the utility bonds, so that went into this note. Now, once we're done with all these wonderful notes, we go to the transmittal letter and MD&A, which should be considered together because they're designed to develop each other. They're not supposed to duplicate information, but the letter of transmittal generally introduces a subject where the MD&A develops it further and gives you a little bit more background to it. And the aim is to have an easily read and understood report that anyone can pick up and read. I said twice. Then we get into GASB 34, which is your government-wide statements versus the fund financial statements. They're not quite the same. And then we also do a little bit of governmental funds versus proprietary funds. This is a snapshot of some of the differences between government-wide and fund financial. The government-wide is trying to look at the overall of everything in the city altogether, whereas the fund financials is each individual fund reported separately. Government-wide is on a full accrual basis. Fund financials is on a modified accrual basis. And what that means is full accrual is you recognize a transaction when it happens, regardless of whether the cash is involved, whereas fund financials works on pretty much a cash basis. You only report it when you have the money or you're spending the money. It becomes modified at year end because if you're going to receive the money within the next 60 to 90 days, you report it as an accrual for things because it's then available to be spent. My other big difference between government-wide and fund financials is the capital assets and long-term debt. Because governmental funds, because it isn't cash, isn't on the fund financials, but it has to be included in the government-wide. And then the fund types are your governmental, your proprietary, and your fiduciary. Governmental funds are your special revenue, your debt service, your capital improvements, and these are, and your general government, because they're supported by taxes and grants. Your proprietary funds are your business, and it's also your internal service funds. And these are supported by fees and charges. And then we have fiduciary funds, which are funds that we hold on behalf of other parties, and the biggest one that we would all recognize right now would be the successor agency. It's a fiduciary fund. And this is a crammed slide of what the government-wide statement of net assets. In private terms, it would be a balance sheet because you have your assets and you have your liabilities. And this breaks it down into just your governmental activities and your business type activities and then a total. And it removes internal service funds because that is the government paying itself for something. Therefore, it's not really truly an expense or a revenue. Hand in hand with that is the statement of activities. In other words, the income statement and expense. What the government-wide does is it shows it by program. So it'll have your public works, your police and fire, your general government, and then it has the business type activities, which is your water, sewer, GVMID, and the park and recreation. You have your expenses, you have whatever revenues that come into it, and then the net. And at the bottom of it, you have the general revenues of your taxes and just general just taxes and other things. And that's what pays your public works, your police and fire, your general government. To offset that, you have the governmental funds balance sheet, which is done by major fund. And I didn't discuss major funds earlier. Major funds is by formula 10%, at least 10% or more of just the total of the governmental, either the assets, the liabilities, the revenue, or the expenses, and 5% of the combined governmental plus enterprise. So it's a wonderful thing. General fund is always a major fund. The other funds can change annually. For the most part, we haven't, but you'll see the community redevelopment was a major fund. It's going away. All the other funds are are combined into a non-major governmental fund to be totaled at the end. And further back in a CAFR, you will find the breakdown, or the individual funds, the non-major funds, all combined. And to go along with that, because the balance sheet, the total of the balance sheet doesn't match the total of the government-wide, in the CAFR there is a reconciling page that will show you what is added to the total liabilities and fund balance to come up with the balance, or the total net assets that's shown on the government-wide. And then we have the governmental fund statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, which again is an income statement. You have your revenues, you have your expenditures, and again you have your general fund, your major funds, your non-major funds. And in the CAFR there is also a reconciliation page to reconcile this back to the government-wide changes of net assets. So once you're all done with the numbers, we get to the required supplementary information, which contains the budget to actual information, and it also has the combining financial statements for non-major funds, internal service funds, and the fiduciary funds. And with that, I'll take questions, and if anyone wants further information, or I'll volunteer Stuart to answer questions for or if anyone wants to come in and talk to us to find out more about the numbers or what is involved, we're more than willing to do that. Did I put you all to sleep?
No.
Scintillating.
It was a ton of information, I must say.
Yeah, I think the kind of question that a lot of people have is, so how does all this relate to the budget which we pass every year? You know, how does it get connected?
The budget is what you're planning. The CAFR is how you really spent your money, and this is why in the required supplementary information you have your budget compared to the actual expenditures, and that's where you find out how well you did or did not do. But this is budget is planning. This is what happened.
Just closing your books.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it also has in some of the accounts, assets, which, and the value of assets, which are not going to be in any operating budget, right?
They are in the business type. You have your assets, and they're on the books, your capital assets.
But I mean
in the governmental funds?
Right.
No, she's asking about comparing it to the budget.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So when you compare, you're right. With the budget, you don't have your assets listed.
Right.
And this is, you look at your financial report for what the assets that you have are, and the comparison is the budget is a year-by-year basis, and your comprehensive annual financial report is your cumulative basis, would be one way to look at it. So what happens on a year-by-year basis adds to the assets or subtracts from the assets that you see then at the bottom line of your comprehensive annual financial report.
The reason I mention that is that the numbers here are, in comparison to the budget, pretty big. And people say, ooh, look at all that money you got. Well, no, we don't really have all that money. It's because a lot of that's tied up in physical assets.
Correct.
Which we've accumulated over the years, and some of which we still owe debt on. And so they're not, free and clear. So, all of that needs to be sorted out, which, if you know how to read all this stuff, it's all there.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
And your budget is generally your revenues and expenditures, not your assets and liabilities.
Right.
And as Betsy said, as staff, we are more than happy at any time to work with anybody from the public who would like to come in and learn more about our budget process or our comprehensive annual financial report. In fact, I get lonely sometimes. I'd be more than happy to have people come in and talk.
If you're lonely, I can help you.
No, I have enough work to do. I just said I'm lonely.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
I think they wrote a song about that. Only the lonely.
So, it's more fun to talk about comprehensive financial reports than problems of a clogged toilet at the pool, huh? Anyway, I think it's been a good education for us, and I hope for some members of the public, that we have to do this on a regular basis, and the information is there and open for anyone to look at. And I know some of the audits in the past have been a little bit difficult for the public to make sense out of, and I think with all the notes and everything, we're getting better at that.
Okay.
But there's still this sort of disconnect between, in a lot of people's minds, between the audit and the annual budget. And I think the more we can do to sort of show the connections and how these do interface, the better job we do communicating all that number stuff to the public, so they have a clearer idea of what our financial situation is.
Sure.
So anyway,
I'm
I'm appreciative.
I did have a question. Did you want to say something, Stuart?
I was going to say, as Betsy said earlier, it's unfortunate that a lot of what's in the comprehensive financial report is required.
Mm-hmm.
So we really don't, as a city, have much leeway in what goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, a lot of what GASB writes it for is other accountants and is trying to make us look much more like a private company.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it has been done for bondholders and bond buyers. I don't think it's really helped that. And I think a lot of what it's done, when GASB 34 came out, which was trying to get us more looking like a business, it had a lot of finance directors across the country complaining because it really changed the way it looks, and it made it much more structured, and it provided information that from a day-to-day basis and a community person from a community level basis really didn't make much sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, and as I said, we are here to help explain it. So anybody who wants it is, we're more than happy to. And then, you're right, trying to figure out how do we make a budget presentation more understandable to the public, I think is something that we all strive to do.
Mm-hmm.
On the financial statement itself, the format, is that done through our current Corbett Willett system? The format?
No, the format's done with through the auditor.
The auditor.
I download the stuff into an Excel spreadsheet, send that into a file format for them, and they go and import it and sort it out and spit out the report.
Okay. I know we have that further on the agenda, so. Okay.
Okay, that's it. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We have oral communications number 1. Anybody like to address the council on items not on the agenda? Seeing no takers, we move on. Consent calendar.
I'd like to remove item A.
Remove item A, okay.
Move approval of item B.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, A, minutes.
Item A, last page, which is page 6, second paragraph. Said C.M. Conway reported on the tour of the fire station and the marina. It's actually a tour of the fire station and the potential maintenance positions at the marina. Because we didn't tour the marina.
That's right.
And under oral communications, number 2, second sentence, it says to be the L.T. Clark property. Strike the E on that because you spelled it differently. I don't want to share my name. Kidding.
Okay. Anything else? Minutes?
That's it.
Want to make a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So that moves us to new business. And we have a letter from the Planning Commission, and I'm assuming that the Community Development Director is going to bring it to our attention.
Well, actually, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Carolyn Parker, the Planning Commission Chairman. If she'd like to go ahead and highlight the letter, or I'd be glad to do it on her behalf if that's her privilege. I'll just kind of really briefly summarize it then. I was looking at our housing element obligations. One of the issues we had to do was rezone a new Southwest Bayshore residential district. In starting to talk to the Planning Commission about how you would zone that property to accommodate the densities required, the Commission, I think, very astutely noted a lot of concerns that made the potential district somewhat problematical, given the slopes, the densities required, some of the issues of access, and so they've requested that we potentially reconsider some of the sites that were previously either rejected or not considered, to look at amending the housing element to look at some different sites for meet our RENA housing obligations. So that's kind of a summary. I'd let the chair add whatever comments she might have at this point.
Okay, Carol?
I think the Planning Commission, the more we looked at the sites on Bayshore, we felt that the density was, with the slope and the density, there wasn't going to be area for open space. The density was going to be about 22 units per acre, I believe, or more, and 20 units per acre, with a 16-unit minimum. It wasn't enough access. We felt that for open space, the open space would be the sidewalk that would be shared with the bicyclists. We felt that there was going to be an awful lot of grading of Bayshore, of the mountain, and we felt that it just wasn't going to be cohesive with Brisbane. We felt that we could do better for our citizens. We could find a place where our citizens would be more a part of the town. There wasn't really, the more we talked about it, the more we realized that there was no unifying feature. There wasn't really a way to really bring these people into Brisbane and out of Brisbane. So basically, fundamentally, they would be stuck on Bayshore, isolated. And I'm not against having housing on Bayshore, and I don't think any of us were. We just didn't want every bit of this one region to be housing that was going to be very dense. Another issue we had was that we felt when the way the traffic was, that people were going to have to drive almost all the way down to South San Francisco in order to come back and come into the housing that was proposed. We would prefer that we go back and look at some other areas. Another idea would be to look at the TWR location. That would be probably aesthetically a more beautiful area, or look at Crocker Industrial Park. We don't know, but we would like to have the opportunity to kind of ditch this idea, because we just don't think it's very pleasant. I don't think it would be pleasant to live in. I think it would be noisy. It just aesthetically, it wouldn't be part of Brisbane. It would feel isolating. And I think that's it. Karen, do you have anything to add?
I do know, obviously, everything Carolyn has said.
Another member of the Planning Commission.
Oh, yeah. Karen Cunningham, Planning Commissioner. When Dave Reinhardt was actually the person who first just suggested we look at VWR, and it was like, oh, that's already got an infrastructure. It's actually quite a beautiful site. Obviously, we don't know if there's any reason that we couldn't put housing there, or we could, but at least at first blush, there's a lot of open space that's there. It's on the water. There'd be places for children to play. From a safety perspective, you're not having children walk out their front door and they're in the traffic. So I think the safety thing came up quite a few times as to how on earth would we make, multiple housing units on Bayshore safe for children, and how pleasant would that be? So that's when VWR kind of came up as well, and I did go down there a few times and drive around, walk around, look around, and thought, well, maybe we'll bring it to you and see what you think. I mean, we don't even know if it's even remotely feasible, but, places in Crocker Park would be safer for our children, and walk to the park and whatever. The kids, if they're down on south end of Bayshore, they're not going to walk up Bayshore to come to our park. It's just didn't sit right with any of us. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
All right. Great. I'm sure we all have questions.
Yeah, I do.
Let's go first this time. Or you ready?
Yeah,
Hey, you can go first.
okay. I'm ready. And I guess this is going to be towards John. Not towards, but to you.
Directed to way.
In regards to this being south of the current mobile home park is the area we're talking about, and currently there is an approved development there. Is that correct?
The area we're talking about, there is no approved residential development.
That's north.
Yeah, north of, about the 30-unit condo is north.
South of is where there's a new building currently going up.
A mixed-use building. The zoning allows both residential and commercial uses by use permit, so it's kind of a horizontal mixed use in a way. As it came up, per state law, when you have to provide additional housing sites, only a certain number can be in a mixed-use kind of component. There's a requirement that a certain amount be devoted on a standalone basis to residential. And to meet our RENA numbers, the decision was made, the mixed use would be, the site down by the shopping center, and the Crocker Park site would be mixed use, and the property at Southwest Bayshore would be a solely residential. All the industrial commercial uses would, become non-conforming, and, expect over time they'd phase out and go to a residential component.
I know that when we first did this, nobody was thrilled with the idea. It's basically going through the exercise of showing that we can zone these areas to meet these RENA numbers. Now, the current RENA numbers expire at the end of next year? Or?
2014 is our housing element. We have to redo it for 2014 to 2022.
And our RENA numbers are going to be
much lower.
Much lower.
Yes.
But legally right now, we still have to show this in this housing element.
Correct.
If we said,
that would be problematic. Right now, we have that obligation for the 401 units that we were short. We have an obligation, and we have a policy in the housing element that we shall rezone, to create this district, and we actually are overdue. I think that was actually supposed to be completed by last October. But in starting the due diligence of actually effectuating the rezoning, that's where a lot of these problems kind of come to light. That it might be easy to say that's the best of a bad situation, but I think a little more time in with the Planning Commission, it's, I think, demonstrated that really is maybe not the best of a bad situation, just a bad situation, and one that we may not want to be obligated with. I think the other question, Clark, is what happens if we get to the end of the 2014 cycle and we haven't perfected all the rezonings we're supposed to create? I don't really know what the implications of that are in terms of the future, whether it carries forward, whether that obligation carries forward or not. I think the city would be in a much better position if we're diligently pursuing our obligations under the housing element, and to have a conversation with the state about if we haven't perfected the rezonings yet. But
is this a Hal question?
I really haven't talked a lot with Hal about this, and I don't think the state is really clear in their minds about how they're going to handle the fact that it's not additive from what the carryover is from the 2014 housing element cycle. I'm not familiar that there's a position. If Hal knows of one, that would be great news.
Yeah, it might be a Hal successor question. I think there's a lot of uncertainty now because with the abolition of redevelopment, which occurred during this cycle, a lot of cities have their housing elements just thrown out of whack because that was going to be the source of most of their affordable housing, including Brisbane.
Right.
So I don't think anyone can give you a definite answer, but I think my knee-jerk reaction would be to say that if you're able to show that you're making a good faith effort to meet that requirement, the fact that it was shown in the housing element, as John said, the commission then went through a good, the due diligence effort and decided there were some problems they felt were created by the selection of this particular site. I read their letter as simply asking for an opportunity to consider some alternatives. So it's not a matter of abandoning the number, it's a matter of substituting one site for another and achieving that number. And given that, I think the best the city can do is if we're challenged by some housing advocate to say, well, we're trying to meet that need, but that doesn't mean that we have to put housing in a place that's unsuitable for the people who are going to live there. And, I think that's a reasonable argument. And plus the fact we would have had some affordable housing underway by now. If it hadn't been for the abolition of the redevelopment agency, we were all set to go with Habitat. And we spent years acquiring the site for that development, and the whole thing just came to a screeching halt. So a lot of the inability to meet some of these numbers was created by external forces beyond our control.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm certainly was never in favor of actually doing that. We're trying to massage around and then take a look at it, and so it's good that the Planning Commission is taking a look at that in more detailed manner, and I would certainly support to maybe look at alternative sites for that.
Yeah, that was my question for John as well. What would be the effect of changing those numbers that we're already committed to, but I really like Hal's response that we're not getting rid of those units, we're just finding a different location, and that was a struggle for the council back then, and the units that are, or the potential residential development that mixed use across from City Hall, that's mixed use, but like John was saying, you can only get so much credit for the mixed use. You have to have some units that are just pure housing. Right. And so, we kind of chose that site as default, but I think that as a council, we've really come around to understanding affordable housing and housing in general, and that it's, housing isn't a bad thing. It's just something that if done correctly, can be very healthy to the community. So, I think it's a great letter. I like the recommendations. Looking at VWR, that's the site that we should be exploring all options for. And then looking at other locations in Crocker Park. Like the post office. I know that was something that the council had discussed when we approved the numbers, but we weren't ready to do that site as a housing.
I don't think you said the post office. So behind the post office.
I say behind the post office. Well, the post office sold in.
Yeah.
Right. That warehouse, not the post office itself, but next door to it. And also being on when we were on the planning commission, looking at when I was on the planning commission, looking at some of those other smaller warehouses that are behind the post office. But like you said, arena numbers are different, and we got the 401 units because of miscalculations in Crocker Park, an old methodology that's no longer in use today. So no, it was based on Crocker Park, on the FAR. That was it was the wrong number, and so they used that to configure what the amount of units that everything is supposed to have. But now we got that sorted out, and so but I think we should look at these sites and kind of take it all in regards to when we do the charrette, and as we educate ourselves further on the value of bringing affordable housing to Brisbane.
I have a observation. I listened to the meeting in which all these questions came up about, is this really the best place to put dense housing? And I think then there were a number of people from the public who spoke as well, pretty eloquently actually, that it is a problematic area for certainly dense housing. So rethinking that, in my mind, for the next housing element, because it doesn't seem as if we're going to get in any big trouble if we don't do anything in the next year and a half or so. If I take the city attorney's comments to imply that. But I do think we should kind of rethink where some of the housing would best go. And I think the whole business of looking at the area, behind the Brisbane Village and some of the warehouses there and that whole opportunity there, I think, of course, that's going to be mixed use, but still, it's worth looking at. The only problem, or I guess the major problem I have with the VWR site is something that needs to be studied. There have been some reports on significant toxic releases there in the VWR site, some of which you'll go back and caught by the fire department. And I mentioned this to one of the old volunteer fire members, and he said, "Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe some of the stuff they dumped back there without telling the city." And if we hadn't been back there, nobody would have known. And so you do have that issue. And before you start, doing any, serious rezoning thought, you need to do some study, and maybe that can be built in the EIR study when we redo the general plan. Because if we're going to start changing something that, that's not housing now to housing, we probably need to study whether it's feasible, particularly if there are some questions about the safety of the soil. So we wouldn't want to, make any mistakes in that respect. Yeah.
Could I piggyback on that a little bit? Because we actually did meet with the property owner at one point, and I think that they're doing the building is still leased till the end of 2014 by VWR, but I think that they're doing a thorough environmental analysis on the soils, if I understood them correctly, to make sure that whatever's there has to be remediated or whatever it is that you got to do, because they don't want to be left with a liability also.
Right.
And I seem to recall one of their ideas on bringing housing. Didn't they say something about that at one point?
My recollection was they were interested primarily in uses. Their first goal was what could they achieve under the current zoning category. They've, I think, evolved a little bit, thinking that the current zoning regulations might not really accommodate their higher and better needs. Housing, to my recollection, didn't really come up because it hadn't been contemplated under the general plan as a housing element site. So we didn't really have at least unless the city manager recollects differently, I don't recollect having a conversation about housing with that owner. I have broached the topic with them in conversation. They're not housing developers per se, but certainly given the market on the peninsula, I suspect he would entertain it if it were a viable option for him to at least study. I didn't get the impression he would rule it out of hand.
Sure. Well, we didn't encourage it either. So I mean, it was. I know we had met with him. That's the first time that I had ever met the owner. They've owned it
a long time,
for the 50 years since the beginning, and I thought it had passed hands, but apparently it didn't. So, so it was a consortium and then family members involved and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But anyway,
but he was motivated, though.
Yeah. To your point, though, I think the testing and stuff. I think that they're going to be doing that themselves to at least find out, even if another business or something is going to move in there or whatever. But I guess if we had to do, if they did want to come in with housing or something like that, that would require a general plan amendment, right? Okay.
Changing the general plan.
Right.
For sure.
Okay. So.
Yeah, but if I may, Mr. Mayor, so I mean, we really haven't had a conversation about post VWR. What are we going to do with this building or this site? And I'm glad that the Planning Commission has brought it up. You're right. I mean, if there are contamination issues out there, they should be dealt with, but they should be dealt with now. And I'm sure that the property owner is going to want to deal with those things now while he still has a lease agreement with VWR. But we should be, thinking of how do we become a good partner with the property owner, because the property owner did reach out to the city of Brisbane and I think is actually quite anxious about doing something better than what currently exists with that building. And so I think if we show that we're open to being a good partner with him, then we could get some things done. So I don't know, Clay, what do you, can you provide maybe some possible steps that we might be able to take?
Well, as you recall, the property owner was pretty strong that he didn't want the city to do anything as long as he was under lease with WR.
Yeah, absolutely, sure.
So that gets us to the end of 2014. I don't think I haven't had any recent conversations with him. I don't know if John has.
The way we sort of discussed it was knowing that the general plan, this was absent the housing conversation, but there's been the discussion that given the status of the general plan update, how it's kind of gone a little stale, and there's going to have to be some relook at certain components. The thought was that could be an opportunity to relook at the VWR site, because as everyone recalls, when we went through the policy issues with the general plan update that was started a number of years ago, that site really wasn't in play. VWR, as far as everyone knew, was going to stay there in perpetuity. There were no land use decisions for that particular district. So the Planning Commission didn't consider it, the council didn't consider it. So given the change in circumstances, that would be a very logical time for that to be revisited at a policy level, as opposed to them maybe getting out in front with a very specific development proposal that's outside the scope of the current general plan and beyond a conversation of what anybody might envision for that property. So they were sort of aligned to track, and they've been tracking, we'd like to track our progress when that were to happen. if this housing consideration issue, we would involve them in that conversation as we already have in terms of even on a preliminary basis to see how willing they are to entertain that concept.
Yeah, that's right. You know, the property owner, he was very hesitant about pushing anything just because he does have a lease and he doesn't want VWR to have any excuse for not paying. So, but that doesn't mean that there can't be things that we can do on our end that are separate from the property owner and, you know, kind of position ourselves. So, yeah, it's a good letter. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I have one other observation, probably getting me in trouble, especially with Mountain Watch, but I've always been of the view that there's some potential for housing in the lower reaches of the Levingston Estate near Main Street, which is to me another place that makes some sense for housing and will be close to eventually to a transit center, transit hub, and so forth. So that's just my personal view. I think as of now, there's some statement in the general plan about some possible housing there already, I think. But it's a PD, I think, but I think there is some statements about housing is okay, but small amounts.
And certainly that's another alternative site you would wish the commission to consider as part of their deliberations. I think that would be fine if you want to do that.
I would prefer that they not.
I was going to say, I realize that I get myself in trouble bringing this up. But
yeah, you did.
That is my view.
I think they can focus on this.
Yeah, you stepped in it, Ray. But yeah, I think right now our current general plan is like up to 45 units.
Right.
And, I think the number.
Right. Okay. So thank you, and obviously the summary answer is we're open to it.
Clear as mud.
Okay, thank you. All right. Software consultant dealing with our financial software.
That is me.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, we've had our current financial software, Mom Software, since 1998, and it's been very good software for us. However, we haven't had any updates from them outside of the payroll and minor updates over the years, and we're concerned that they seem to have a shrinking client base. So in view of that and looking forward many years, we'd like to consider looking at other software. And part of it is that we're looking at different ways of doing our budget by programs and other things, and our current software is a little bit limited in that we only have 4 divisions within our chart of account numbers, where more robust software, there are some that go up to 22, which I think is a little excessive, but there are other software programs that have more ability than we currently have with Mom. The other thing is I'm hoping to retire by the end of 2015, and this would probably be a good time to transition over while I am still here, because I did used to work for Mom Software.
Well, you know from Hal, we never let anybody retire.
well, Stuart keeps telling me that whatever he can do to keep me longer, he's going to do. But
he's following Bob's handcuffs there.
We won't go there. Because I did work for Mom Software, and I do know the software quite well, so I know how to get the data out of it to transition it over to another software, and we have that way we've got some ability to look at that. The other thing is that in choosing new software, you've got a lot of best practices, and one of the first best practices is doing what they call a needs assessment. And that's interviewing all the departments that would want or use the financial software to figure out what it is that would best help them get the information they need to provide services to the city. And after that, then you do the RFP. You get the bids back, and you review the vendors, and you ask for demos from them, and then you choose and move forward. Our problem is we've done a lot of RFPs, but doing a wide-scale needs assessment is outside of staff skill limits at this time. So we'd like to hire a consultant to help us do the needs assessment, because we figure if we have someone else come in and interview all the different departments, we could come up with a better plan on how to scope the RFP to get what we want. Mm-hmm. The other thing is hopefully also within that needs assessment, they'll help us tailor down to what tier level we would be looking at for vendors. And tier 1 is your enterprise software such as Oracle and SAP, which I really don't think we need, all the way down to tier 5, which is what they call the shrink wrap market, which might be two boilerplate. So it's trying to determine all of these factors. I think a consultant could help us in that. And towards that end, we want to put $30,000 into next year's budget to help us with a consultant, help us pick a new software. And the software will probably cost up to about $200,000. That's including the training and the implementation, because that training and implementation should be budgeted for almost as much as the software itself costs, just to make sure that you've got it all nailed down.
And as the finance director, my other concern about doing it while Betsy's here is one of the challenges when you go to a new software system is when you run parallel to make sure the new software system is working the way you anticipate it. Bringing on a new accounting manager or deputy finance director at the same time that person's trying to learn a new software and keep the mom working at the same time would be extremely difficult. So this is an opportune time for us to look at it. And as Betsy said, we are beginning to get issues of just not keeping up with the market with mom.
Yeah, and I think Cliff and I would like to add, as the finance subcommittee, we have considered this issue, and we started in a little more dire terms, because there is a possibility that this software becomes obsolete and it's not serviced, not supported, and all of a sudden our financial system, which is dependent upon it, is, everything has to be done manually, and you can imagine the number of hours that would involve if it was even possible. And so we got kind of worried that we're really skating on thin ice, and we really need to do this as soon as feasible. That sort of our sentiment?
Yeah, and then, we talked about, perhaps looking at doing the accounting on the cloud. Mm-hmm. And so, and you mentioned that a little bit in your staff report, Betsy. Do you know of any cities that have gone from software-based to doing it on the cloud?
Not yet, but I have sat through a couple of sessions at conferences where you have the IT people talking about what cloud computing is, and all cloud computing really is your off-site servers, which has been around for years, and there's a lot of different ways that they can structure this now as to whether or not you own the software, you're just renting the software, and you're renting the hardware, or do you have full control of that server, or are you sharing space on the server? So these are all things that have to be looked into as we move down this road.
Yeah, we run our company using cloud computing, and of course we did the old-fashioned way back in the day, and but it has a lot of advantages, and you talked about being able to share that financing information with all the different departments, and then of course you have your public works director, and he is his view is just his department, and he's blocked out on the other departments, or if he needs to be in a portion of some other department, he has access to that, and I don't know if that's something that is available with what you currently have, but it seems like there's the potential to have greater sharing of information, collaboration of information, but also, there's a level of security too that's built in.
Correct. One of the other advantages of cloud computing is that they are usually someplace other than where we are. In fact, they could be in another part of the United States altogether. Therefore, if we, which is a kind of a protection, so that if we have an earthquake and the servers are someplace else, you still have ready access once you get a computer working on an internet again, that you can get back into your data, which is an advantage.
Yes, and then sometimes when being a part of the cloud, as updates are implemented, you're just kind of being a part of that. So you don't find yourself in the situation that we are in today, where this part of the economy has changed, and so we're kind of riding on an old horse that we're going to have to get off pretty soon.
Yeah, I agree that the planning process needs to start happening now, and I think that's prudent course of action. I also agree with you that they don't need a tier one like Oracle, because I've dealt with Oracle in a corporate, not the municipal corporation, but the standard corporation, and it's way too much and way too complicated. It would drive you crazy. It's not very user friendly from an aspect. Is $30,000? What's that going to get us with a consultant? What I guess describe the type of consultant you're looking for.
I've done a little bit of research. There's a couple of them out there that have what they call a menu driven, so that you can select as much or as little as you want from them. But for the needs assessment, what most of them do is they will come in and do some in-person group interviews. They will do some phone interviews to help you develop what it is that everyone wants, and then help you structure that so that you can. It feeds into the RFP process. They also can do the RFP if we wanted to. They will set up the demos. They will help you negotiate. Just anything you want, they'll help you with.
Okay, but we're not affiliated. We're not looking for a consultant who's affiliated with the software provider.
Oh no, so. I'm much smarter than that.
One of the advantages of having a consultant is that they could come in and see how we're doing our business and know how other cities do theirs.
Yeah.
So we may find that there may be more efficient ways of doing some of our work, whereas if we were to write an RFP, we would do an RFP based on what we're currently doing, not what some of the other best practices out there are.
No, I'm sure there's some data that we could probably gather beforehand too, maybe like municipal corporation software.
There's about 5 or 6 that are probably working in cities of our size and our complexity.
Okay, and then if we had a pool of those cities for the consultant to, you know what I mean, to find out what their nuances are, what the ease of use is, and stuff like that. I guess we have a technology subcommittee too, and this being a technology, that how would we interface with that? I mean, we've had to.
Anyway, I think it would be, we brought it to the finance subcommittee because there's a lot of financial issues with the system. I think it would probably behoove us to work with both, one from the technical side of working with, the idea of cloud computing versus on-site computing, and then working with the financial side to make sure that whatever system we were to purchase was able to provide information to the council and to the public in the way that the council would like to see it. So I can see, I think there, as you said, there's 2 different aspects of this. There's that very technical side that works well with the IT subcommittee. Our concern from a financial perspective, especially with the Affordable Care Act coming on, is the amount of reporting that we have to do, the types of tracking, and we're not quite sure how MOM is going to be able to do that at this point in time. So I think having a conversation with both subcommittees would work best. As we get closer through with the consultant helping us figure out what we're looking for.
Where we're at and where we want to go.
Right, and maybe having a consultant potentially meet with both subcommittees to explain both sides of the issues.
Very good. That's why we pay you the big bucks, Stuart.
Yeah, right. So,
why I invested.
what are you asking us to do this evening, if anything?
Tonight we were just introducing the idea this is going to be an item that's going to be in the budget for next fiscal year. So we were just making, if this is not an item that you wanted us to pursue, we would remove the $30,000 from next year's budget. So this is more of an informational.
Well, but I think we did want to get authorization to move forward with the RFP process.
Yes, if we could go forward with the consultant, we can hit the, we can get a RFP out for the consultant prior to the budget if this is something that the council's going to.
So you'd like us to move ahead on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, so you're asking for us to authorize you guys to inquire about consultants?
Yes.
Okay. Hire a consultant. Okay. So then, I do have a question if I
Sure.
Mr. Mayor. Have we reached out to the league to see, what assistance that they have in regards to being able to help cities make that leap from 20th century technology to 21st?
We have reached out actually to GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association.
Mm-hmm.
So we have reached out to our industry group for that.
When I'm just thinking Lead California Cities Conference, and you go to the expo, I mean, there's a ton of IT folks, county people, selling their services.
And they have our business cards.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so and the reason I'm bringing it up is that there might be the opportunity to get some free assistance in regards to what potentially you might want to do. Just being a business owner, if I have I'm trying to get some new business, I'll have a meeting with the client and I'll tell them all the things I can do. That doesn't mean they're gonna use me, but they'll also receive some information that I would provide, and they might do this for somebody else.
Dusty and I have met with a number of different of the providers. So, the league has been very helpful for that, making those kinds of contacts. The challenge is just, really understanding what they tell us versus what an expert in the field knows what they actually do.
Absolutely, and that's where having some precedence with some other cities. You combine both of those those avenues of information. That makes you more educated as well, and so I'm just throwing it out there.
So, would you be so kind as to articulate the kind of motion you're looking for?
I think what we're looking for is the council to provide direction to staff to move forward with bringing a consultant for a new financial system in the next fiscal year, so that we would go out with what we're looking for is to be able to provide direction for that early in next fiscal year we would have a consultant on board. I'm trying to think of how to phrase that. I don't know if it's Hal or Clay for a system.
How about just direct staff to place this in the 2013-14 budget and to move forward with the RFP process?
Okay. Sound all right? Everybody at the table here? Hal, sounds okay to you? Okay. Want to make that motion, Clay?
Cliff does.
Cliff does. Okay. Cliff, want to make the motion?
The motion
Okay.
to
I'll second it. Okay.
to dedicate
we'll let them get it from
$30,000.
Well, we don't want to put an amount in yet.
You don't need them.
Just send an amount. Okay,
Put
allocate
the item in the
into the 2013-2014 budget.
right.
Okay.
and move forward with the RFP.
Move forward with the RFP. Okay.
Second that.
Okay, moving second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. You got your direction. So what's your pleasure? We got 2 more items, plus all the staff reports. You want to take a break at this point?
Okay.
You want to keep going? What's your...
Let's see, Mr. Brown.
You're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right.
I'm fine.
Let's keep rolling. The next is the garbage collection zones, and who's going to take the lead on that?
I will do that.
Okay. Mr. Topple.
As indicated in the staff report, the current municipal code provides for a single franchise for collection of solid waste, and that franchise would cover the entire city. All this ordinance will do is to allow the establishment of separate collection zones. When it comes back to you the second time for adoption, there will also be a resolution with it that will delineate the boundaries of those zones. You've had one written communication expressing some concern, and what I will say is that the zones will not divide one street into 2 areas, nor will it result in any additional garbage collection vehicles running through town. What we have in mind are much larger zones, probably 3 at the most, but if you look at the municipal code, everything is phrased in terms of the garbage collector, the city. There's nothing there that would allow, under the existing language, the award of multiple franchises. And there's no reason under the state law why we couldn't set it up that way and award multiple franchises either to the same collector or to different collectors. We are not taking that action now. In fact, tonight we're not even establishing the zones. All we're doing is amending the ordinance that would allow those zones to be established by council resolution, and then you'll see the actual boundaries of those zones when it comes back to you for second reading. And it changes the references to the garbage collector from the singular to the plural. And beyond that, that's pretty much all this ordinance will do at this point. But I want to emphasize again that we envision maybe just a couple of zones covering major portions of the city. Quite frankly, we're talking about the Baylands as a separate zone and the rest of the city as a separate zone, because we felt the city should have its options open in terms of determining how the solid waste collection service ought to be provided to that new development. And so this is simply to keep those options open, and the council can decide at a later date how you want to establish the boundaries, and then even beyond that, to whom the franchise agreements would be awarded. I would have to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, I should say that this item has been discussed at some length in probably several subcommittees.
Correct.
So the reason there's not going to be a whole lot of questions from the council anyway is that we've been over this territory a number of times, and it makes sense to us. So, Carolyn?
In each of these zones, would the city negotiate with the refuge companies, or would it be, how would that?
Good question.
How are you thinking?
I'll let our city attorney answer that, so we don't put it in a...
The answer is yes. There would be a separate franchise agreement negotiated directly between the city and the solid waste collector. And there's no necessary requirement that those agreements be exactly the same. So each one would be an individually negotiated contract.
Right.
And at this present time, you were saying that you were thinking of 3 different zones. One would be Bayshore, and one would be Brisbane, and...
Not Bayshore.
I mean, not Bayshore. It's the Baylands.
Yeah.
Again, the boundaries will come back to the council at the next reading, but in general, what we have in mind is all of Central Brisbane as a zone, all of the Baylands as a zone, and the third zone would be basically the industrial way area, which is already developed and is not part of the Baylands project.
Industrial What, are you talking about industrial?
Industrial. Industrial way.
Oh, okay,
Street,
thank you.
yeah.
Street.
Oh, I
Sorry.
see. Okay,
Right.
all right, thank you.
And the reason for that third zone, I may as well say now, is we don't really know where that's going to end up. It may end up as part of the Baylands development, it may end up remaining separate. So we felt it would be better just to set it aside as a separate zone right now and then deal with it at some later date.
So the key is to give us some flexibility in how to
Correct.
proceed.
That's right.
With both the franchise agreements and maybe even who gets the franchise agreement.
And what about Sierra Park?
Sierra Point?
Sierra Point.
That would be a part of...
That would probably be in the Baylands zone, but again, that whole issue will come back to the council, and you can decide where you want to draw the boundaries, but...
All we're doing now is giving ourselves the opportunity to divvy up the city into zones, a few zones, rather than just one, which it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. All you're doing now is you're giving yourself the tool to establish zones, and then the actual establishment of those zones will come back to the council a little later date.
And so Crawford Park would stay part of
Correct.
Brisbane, Central Brisbane.
Unless the council decides otherwise. But that issue is not before you tonight.
Yeah, right.
So.
Thank you very much for your clarification.
Okay, thank you. So, any further council discussion?
That's good. Okay, I'd make a motion to introduce ordinance number 581. Second.
Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, Hal. All right, now I bet you we're back to Stuart again. Because we have a complicated financial matter that you now need to explain to us.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. This is an item that the City Council saw previously. Just to give you background on what you had seen previously, the city has an outstanding liability with PERS called a side fund. This was created when the city went with its miscellaneous employees when we went to the 2.7 at 55 formula with PERS. And when the city went to 2.7 at 55 for the current employees, we offered two-tiered our system. And this was back in 2008. The second tier in our system was 2% of 60. So that has long-term savings for the city. It also limits the number of people who are eligible for 2.7 at 55. So there were a lot of good things that we did at that point to create long-term financial stability for the city. But what it did was set up an outstanding liability based on the fact that we were not always saving money at the 2.7 at 55 formula. What PERS does is when they set up a side fund is they charge you what their current rate of interest is. They anticipate. They currently anticipate 7.5% a year on their investments. So they charge us 7.5% on our outstanding liability. We have the ability to go to the open bond market and get an interest rate lower than that to save money. We came to council and we sought that request. We actually had a bank bid on the bond. The interest rate that they are charging us is 3.7% a year. The other issue that is out there is the side fund lasts for another 15 years. The city, when we talked with council last, we looked at the option of reducing that 15-year liability to a 10-year liability to make it more attractive to bond buyers. We did get a 10-year bond. The net savings over the life of that in real dollars or nominal dollars from that perspective is about $600,000, and the net present value savings that we're going to see is $300,000 over the 10-year period.
What discount rate do you use?
We're using the discount rate of the bonds.
Same as the bond?
Yes. We are also wrapping the payments around existing pension obligation bonds. We had other pension obligations bonds that we sold in 2004 to pay off a side fund that was created when we went to the pool for small cities. At that time, we had the same basic opportunity to save money by selling a bond. We did that. That is why if you look at our final numbers and the second page of the report from our financial advisor, it shows that we have an increasing debt service. We start off with a debt service of about $98,000 in 2013, 2014, and it increases to $386,000 in fiscal year 23. In fiscal year 22, and something is when our other bonds are paid off. And I have to look to make sure that's right, but what it does is now the other bond is paid off in 2019. So in 2019, we're going to see a savings of about $500,000 on our existing bond, and at which point in time our new bond would kick up in its interest rate and its payment. So it levels off our debt to some extent. In order to get the 3.7% interest rate, one of the things that we needed to do was not do this as a straight pension obligation bond, but do it as a lease revenue bond, which we talked about previously. The challenge with doing straight pension obligation bonds is there have been some cities that, as they've been going through their bankruptcy issues, have said that they don't want to pay previous debt for their pensions. So it makes it harder to sell straight pension obligation bonds. We have put up one of our water tanks as collateral to make the payment. So that helped get the lower interest rate to 3.7. As this is one of those issues where we have every intention of paying it, we had every intention of paying it to PERS. So it's really not putting anything at risk for the city other than what we already owed, and this was a way for us to save money. So what you have before you are two different resolutions. One is with the city of Brisbane to enter into the agreement with the Brisbane Financing Authority. So what we do is the Brisbane Financing Authority is the person who is the entity that will lease the water tank back to the city, and then the Brisbane Financing Authority is going to use the revenue that it gets from leasing the water tank to the city to be able to make its bond payments. And it's a structure of financial deals that we have used in the past. The documents have been written by our bond counsel, Ryan Quint. They've been reviewed by Umpqua Bank, which is the bank that is loaning us the money, and everybody is in agreement that the resolutions and the documents are in order for us to move forward with doing the refi. I hope I was able to make the complicated deal a little bit more understood and as to why we're doing it. Bottom line is this saves us money.
Yeah. It'd be nice if there was a little chart, though, that shows, like, all the different entities and how it moves around. And
I will remember that for the next time.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great PowerPoint.
It does sound like a great PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And on page 6 of the final numbers report, it shows you what the savings are period by period from the current debt. And what it shows is that the current debt would have extended through 2028, and we're now going to be able to pay it off in June of 2023.
Yeah. John?
Okay, question?
But I hate to use the term no-brainer.
It took a lot of brain cells.
No, I mean, up here, ours is...
We try to make it as easy as possible.
I don't really have a question on the thing. I just found it interesting reading, especially on Exhibit A, on description of the site.
Yeah.
I know a lot of those people.
Yeah, I know.
I have a couple of questions. The bank I never heard of. Umpqua. So I'm sure the bond counsel has thought of it because he thinks of everything. But it doesn't strike me as a very well-known bank that may or may not be around in 5 years, and especially if we have another financial crisis. So what happens then?
Well, we would have gotten the money from them. So our asset would be part of our bond would be part of their assets. So if and when they got bought out by somebody else, that would be one of the assets that would get bought out, and we would continue to make our payments to whoever the trustee of that financial institution is. Although they are a growing financial institution, I was in Reno this weekend, driving around, and there was an Umpqua.
I'll be darned.
That's what I said. I pointed out to my kids. I said, I know that bank. We're going to borrow money from them.
Sure really livened them up, too.
Well, you have to realize on the entire drive up, we were listening to lectures on the Tudor
family
history. Yes. These are the things I do with my kids. That's why one of them is going to Scotland for college. Well, more away from my dad. I do know why.
Trying to get it. You don't want to get out of town. Let's get out of the country.
He wanted to get out of the country.
But I take it we're fully protected. Some other bank takes over.
Yes.
They have to follow the
same
contractual rules.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to hear that. And then there's a statement here that you have actually explained, but the way it's put in here is a little bit puzzling. And that's in the staff report under the fiscal impact. The city will save about $40,000 a year while the existing pension obligations are being retired. After they are retired, we will have a negative savings. However, this will allow us to pay off the obligation 5 years early. Would you explain that sentence?
Sure. So on page 6 of the final number sheet, which is provided by our financial advisor. For instance, in fiscal year 13-14, which is the first 2 payments, we currently would owe PERS about $140,000, and we will end up paying Umpqua about $100,000 in that first year. So we'll have about that $40,000 savings. But if we look in fiscal year 2018-19, we would owe PERS about $163,000. It's worth $81,479 twice, and we would pay Umpqua about $211,000, which we would pay more to Umpqua than we would to PERS. But this is also after we have finished paying off our first round of debt. So that way we have more available cash to make this payment, which is why we did it this way. And then in fiscal year 23-24, where we would be paying PERS about $185,000, we would be paying Umpqua nothing. So we would have that full savings. So in order to retire the debt earlier, we have to pay more at some point, and we wrote it such that we would pay more after one of our existing pension obligation bonds expires. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
It's one of those problems I have, as you know, is that I know the details so well that sometimes I don't get the explanation so everybody can understand.
Okay. That was helpful. Thank you. Any other questions? Clark thinks it's a no-brainer. All right, so we have 2 resolutions we need to adopt. Who would like the pleasure of moving the adoption of the first one, which is resolution...
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2013-13. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, then we got another one.
Make a motion of approval of resolution Brisbane Public Financing Authority 2013-01. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we made it.
All right.
Thank you.
How long have we had the same bond council? Seems like about 40 years.
Long time.
I must be real
Since the 90s.
We've had them, I see their names on the books going way back, and I think before Quinton Spending became their own bond council company, they were part of a bigger company, so we still use them basically even before they became their own. And I think that's what happened. They broke off, and we continued to use them because they are very qualified.
I remember them from '94.
Yeah.
So you probably remember them before that.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody else that never retired.
I hope not. He's not that old.
Is that right?
Yeah, he's probably Clay's age.
Brian?
Not very old.
Oh, okay.
Actually, he might be younger. I don't know.
I know. I was just saying, I was sucking up. I was working my best at it.
Oh. Yeah, well, you got to smile for that work. Okay.
He's not the one that gives you the raise.
Move on to staff reports, and that's the city manager's report. Hi.
So the item on this agenda is the discussion of the budget schedule for next upcoming few weeks. Our introduction night will be on May 28th, which is a week from tomorrow. We'll be doing introduction and some of the department budgets that evening. June 3rd is a regular council meeting, but we're also going to share that with a budget night, and we'll be doing a number of the department's presentations on that evening also. And then we'll follow it up on June 10th, finish up the departments, the capital budget, and basically be done for that evening in terms of the department presentations. Unless we don't get through them all, then we're going to ask you to preserve Tuesday, June 11th as a make-up date in case we aren't able to get through everything. But we do anticipate right now being able to get through by the 10th. And then the actual adoption of the budget will be on your regular council meeting of June 17th.
Okay. Sound fine with everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, anything else?
There is one other item, but I think Cliff's going to bring it up on under economic development, and we can have a discussion about it. An event coming up in mid-June.
Okay.
We'll wait until we get there.
So was that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then, Mayor Council matters. Subcommittee reports, and a number of them listed here. North County Fire.
With that one, we approved the annual budget, and it did go up a little bit. I think Brisbane, maybe, what, $2,000 or something.
It's pretty similar to last year's.
Yeah, just and that's mainly due to, I think, health benefits. Yeah, wasn't much.
Okay.
Comparatively to Daly City and Pacifica, that was really it. That was about a 15-minute meeting.
Yeah, wow. Okay. All right. Finance Subcommittee. Any more we want to add?
Yeah, I mean, we're still looking at trying to get a handle on how much things cost for service that we provide, and a deeper analysis of things that we spend money on. Hopefully, when we do come before the council, full council, that you'll have a better understanding of looking at priorities and hopefully establishing that criteria for how we spend. Not just what we're spending money on today, but looking at how we provide, I think, greater transparency and just a more accountability for when folks come before the council, or when we decide, we want to spend money on something, that we have some kind of foundation to base it on.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We've been working a lot with, especially with Stuart. We're moving a little bit more in the program budgeting direction, and more so with some departments than others, because it's a shift in the approach. which kind of leads into the next item as well. Want me to take that one?
Yeah.
Park and Recreation. Because the department that we're probably going to do the most programmatic changes in so far as the budget presentation is in Recreation. And so we thought, it's going to come before the council, of course, but we thought maybe it would be a good idea to meet with the Parks and Recreation Commission to explain to them the new approach and the new way of trying to figure out, how much does each recreation program actually cost, its delivery cost, and help them make priority decisions. But we felt that it would be good for us to go to them probably after the budget is adopted, maybe in August, and give a good rundown as to the new approach to the recreation budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we also talked a little bit about establishing a position, perhaps, that works on economic development, works on sustainability, with the Open Space and Ecology Committee. So, with the departure of Lisa, how do we help provide staff for the Open Space and Ecology Committee? That's kind of going into some new territory, and we're talking a little bit about it, but I know that's going to be a pretty big item for discussion amongst the whole council.
Okay. Sustainability, you want to fly with that one?
Sure. We had our new representative from the Park and Rec Commission, Jamie Dunn. She was there, and also Renee was there. She's the alternate for the Park and Rec Commission. And so we were just giving them more of a some feedback and some history of the committee and how it came together, and looking at the next steps where we start to take the information that the council has already looked at and provide these performance indicators for the to help implement the objectives that are in each principle.
And kind of help us shape direction, feedback.
Yes, and one of the things that we did talk about, we're going to need some assistance in this area from Jeff Cyphers. It's one thing to come out with an idea and say, we should, or find something that some other part of the country or part of the world is doing in sustainability, but then, how do you measure its implementation and its long-term success? And so that's kind of the next step that we're going to be taking. Yeah. And then also to have it be something that can be used to help the community to understand what it wants to see out in the Baylands. And so, anything else, Ray?
No, I think that's good. Stuart set up a whole schedule for us.
Yes, now he's driving it.
He really is driving us. We're scheduled all the way through September, I think.
Yeah.
Load them up in July. That's for anything that you want to get a yes to. Get a default. I think you're both on vacation then, right?
Right.
Okay, Clark, the next is yours, right?
Yeah. ALS JPA, this is Advanced Life Support Joint Powers Authority, and this is quite a few of the cities and fire districts in San Mateo County, and has to do with how we provide ambulance service. And one of the big things that you're kind of looking at is the antiquated communications, or the hodgepodge of communications. And every place has something different. And I think in North County Fire, when we combined, together, we were able to put some stuff together, but, some like factors. But right now we're looking at going out and hiring a consultant, because use right now a one-person operation, basically, and who may retire. Who does? Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. We basically held hostage, through this, and I think we're looking at getting a consultant to find out where we're at, and what we want to do on the communications level. And there's a lot of technical stuff that goes along with that. Honestly, I think most of the board doesn't even understand what's going on. Did a true assessment. I mean, I really, just from the questioning, and kind of confusing for me too. It's complicated, and so I see that staff could have a level of confusion also. That this is something that was kind of thrown together, and maybe say if you want to expound on it on any of the missing pieces.
No, I think you hit it right. It's one of those things where the communication systems for the fire departments have arrived where they're at today over decades, with a lot of different ad hoc decisions that have been made. And what we're trying to do is kind of pull together more of a comprehensive oversight of it. The ALS JPA doesn't actually have any specific authority to manage the communications system, and I use the word system very loosely. It is just kind of what it is. But there's a desire, especially at the fire department level, to try to get our hands around this. First of all, come up with an inventory of all the communications equipment throughout the county, and then identify what the capital plan and replacement timing, and then look at some of the funding issues that might be involved with that. So I think we're going in the right direction, and it's going to take some time, and it's a fairly Herculean effort to kind of put all this together.
Mm-hmm.
So who all belongs to the ALS?
Every public agency in San Mateo County that has responsibility for fire service.
Oh, they all belong.
Yes.
Okay. Does that include the county? Right?
Yes, and actually that was new this last go around. County joined because they contract with county CAL FIRE to provide fire service in some of the unincorporated areas.
Right. Okay. Good. Maybe we'll get there before the next earthquake, huh?
Can I say something about that too?
You're not smiling, so.
No, that's interesting thing, because I also sit on the OES JPA with the Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services.
Okay.
And that's most of the cities in San Mateo County, I believe, and it's regulated with the Sheriff's Office, which is kind of funny because sometimes the police and fire, they're on different frequencies, of communication systems, but sometimes there's not a connect there. It's interesting on how it would work in an actual disaster, because you have your incident commander, and you have to have, both the police and fire stand by, because they're on different communication systems. And one of the things that, first, let me just tell you this first part on earthquake or disaster preparedness, because what the Sheriff's Office found in Hurricane Sandy in New York and New Jersey, the feedback that they got was the most effective communication system that worked during that whole time was Twitter. Yeah, no, it was. And they found out that the feedback that they got, that Twitter was actually the best device to get information out in short spurts. And that, so San Mateo County Sheriff has now opened up a Twitter account. The City of Brisbane, we've had one for about 2 years, and I think when the technology subcommittee first looked at it, was going, what are we gonna Twitter? Clay's twiddling his thumbs again, or no? I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, but it turns out to be a very effective tool, and so it just goes out, as long as your communication's up. So anyway, I found that very interesting. But the second part is with all the communication towers along that handles both the police and fire frequencies. We had one particular one that was located on Skylawn, and the cemetery at the top of Skyline Ridge, and it's a very critical communication tower, especially for the coast side, to be able to go over. And Skyline wanted it moved because the lease is up. And I think they pay $1,000 a month for that site. And so there was a whole lot of discussion about where are we going to move to? I was thinking, it's a cemetery. We wanted to do it for aesthetic reasons. I asked the county council was embarrassed, but can we ask the county council on, could we do, eminent domain? And they never asked the question, so now we asked it again because it wasn't in the minutes. So now we want to answer because a couple of us asked that question. It's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, I understand negotiating and stuff, but you're wanting to move it to La Honda out in about 14 people's front yard. And that's going to fly like a lead balloon. And, of course, when that was approached, everybody said, no, you're not putting it here. So they're trying to work with Skylawn on where to put this tower or whether to move it on site or whatever, but also will get back to us on whether how eminent domain would work, too, because apparently it's a new management system that bought it, and I said, I'm not concerned with the dead, I'm concerned with the living. It's an important communication feature, so,
Yeah, that's a good location, too.
Yeah, it is. So, I mean, it's an important feature, and I think it was more had to do with aesthetics than anything else.
Yeah.
But apparently all the cities had put in money for the communications devices, and there was still like a pool of almost $1.2 million. We can help facilitate a move, but, it was going to cost $600,000 or $700,000 of that pot. It's like, that doesn't make sense, I don't know. So we'll have to see how all that comes out. But that was my other subcommittee, and then you have CCAG on there, if I can kind of keep going a little bit.
Right, yeah.
Interesting part of CCAG was PG&E did a presentation that they've applied to the California Public Utility Commission for a rate hike that would be tied into a capital improvement project, or capital improvement plan, which will be 12% for everybody.
Wow.
And I asked them how they would be charging this. Would it be on a commodity or transmission charges? And they said, well, it's going to be tied into the transmission charges. So, if you look at your electric bill, you got what you pay for electricity, what you pay for gas, and then you have a charge of what your transmission charges on there. So it's going to be tied into that. So there's no, you know what I mean? So they're not raising the rate on what you pay for electricity, but they're raising the rate on how to get it to your house. So it's kind of interesting, and I just think there's going to be a lot of backlash about that. They start doing their community outreach, and Clay, I don't know if you know when that's going to be, but apparently they're holding some kind of workshop in somewhere I didn't get it. I don't have my notes with me with that, so unfortunately.
Scott did get a hold of me last week, and I'll get that information out to you, and we'll put it on our website too.
Yeah.
But it is relatively quickly, and it's I believe it was like in South San Francisco.
Yeah. Somewhere. Oh, I do. Yeah, maybe South San Francisco Convention Center or something.
Could be something like that. Yeah. So we'll get that information out.
Anyway, it's kind of pretty interesting because I think that, probably most people in PG&E served areas are not even going to realize it until they get hit. And that's like a lot of things. So it'd be good for us to at least get that word out as much as we can. Also, legislative-wise, I don't know if you remember Matt February. Used to work for the city, and he's the coordinator for CCAG for NPDES, National Pollution Discharge Elimination Systems. So he really trying to help push some legislation through to get, where the storm drains are, being able to go through without having to go through the typical 218 process, and how maybe you know more about that if you want to.
Yeah, the problem is you don't have to conduct an election for water and sewer charges, but the court has determined that sewer charges meant sanitary sewer and not NPDES fees, which are essentially kind of storm drain charges. So the early opinion was that you could use just a notice and public hearing process of 218 for NPDES fees, and then that basically got shot down. So they're trying to do a legislative solution. So if you had to increase those fees, you would do it in the same manner that we now increase water and sanitary sewer fees, which is a much more abbreviated process.
The end.
Question on CCAG, was there any discussion of solar, renewable energy, etc.?
From PG&E perspective, yeah. They said that that's going to also be tied into it is what they would be doing for renewables, building solar fields, putting solar in. So there was that segment too.
Because one of the things they're also talking about is increasing the charges to people who have solar panels on their roofs. Because they don't want to use the peak metering system. They think, well, they're not paying enough to PG&E, so they want to undo some of the incentive for putting solar panels on roofs. So PG&E, as usual, is totally contradictory in its policy.
Yeah, we're going to find a way to stick it to everybody. I mean, for that segment, I guess that's a different thing than what they talked about. They didn't talk about that. Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting, all of this comes from what happened in San Bruno.
Right.
This pipeline upgrades and all that, So now they're trying to find a way to offset these costs.
Right. And make somebody else pay for it.
Right.
Yeah. We heard Clay, the city manager from San Bruno. I forgot her name, but I heard her several times say the most dysfunctional organization in the world is called PG&E. They're very frustrated in San Bruno. I think I quote her correctly. I think she said that, something to that effect. Yeah. Okay. Economic development.
Yeah. Let's see.
This has to do with the bullet thing. Might as well go with that. That's kind of really all we have, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I think we talked. I think we mentioned the bullet group to the full council, and that we were in negotiation with them in regards to putting on an event in Brisbane. And
maybe explain what bullet is.
sure. So,
Just spell it and everybody will know.
So the Steve McQueen movie, Bullet, was filmed, the famous car chase scene was filmed in Brisbane. Right. And so there's a group of folks that are into the movie, and they want to celebrate the 45th anniversary of the movie. And so they're coming from all parts of the country. They have an event up at Black Hawk in Danville, and there's an event in San Francisco. And we thought, well, hey, let's tie into that. Let's bring these folks into Brisbane. And so we negotiated, a celebration that also helped raise money for a local project, which is the skate park. And so we reached out to the Lions Club, reached out to the Mothers of Brisbane, see if they wanted to be part of it, because they were very involved with the Zippy race, which was raising money for the skateboard park. And just to let you know about the Zippy race, were the club said that they made $987, and so they're going to give the Mothers of Brisbane $500 for the skateboard park. So so that was pretty cool. But $500 is a lot less than we all thought we were going to get, and from the Zippy race. But it's first year event, and so and that was kind of the catalyst for bringing them involved with helping with this event here. And so Mitch Bull had reserved the Mission Blue Center, and so I also have a neighbor who has a band. They played at the Zippy race. They're going to play at this event.
What's the date?
June 21st. Friday, June 21st. And so it's open to all folks, $25 a ticket, and the Lions Club is going to cook barbecue. We have, I think, some tri-tip, some corn on the cob, and some Spanish rice.
And they're going to show the movie?
We're going to show the movie at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
4 p.m.
Okay.
We'll show the movie, then we'll have dinner, then we'll have the band play, and we'll play music from the Bullet era, which is late 60s. So Beatles, Rolling Stones, you got it. So, and then the proceeds, all proceeds will go towards skate park. So,
And just a bit of historical lore, the location where the gas station was, that was blown up in that big crash in the movie, of course, is now an office building.
That's right. But it never was a gas station.
Well, no, it was just a fake.
No, it was a fake gas station. It was former City Hall.
That's right.
150 North Hill.
That's right. Yeah.
It became afterwards, but no, there was nothing there, and they just did a Hollywood prop up. But it burned for hours upon hours. I remember it, and I missed the explosion.
Yeah.
I saw it in the movie. I was here that day. So I remember coming back and it burning.
So that's where we are with that.
Okay. So anything else from the economic development, or basically you're going to be making your full-scale report in August, right?
August, yeah. We'll be getting the hotel hotel site analysis in June, and we're going to tie that in there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other subcommittees? Move on to communications. We have a letter from the mayor of Daly City. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I actually asked Commander Meisner to be here. He's been attending a number of the meetings relative to this issue.
You got to give him a chance to say something after staying here all evening.
Absolutely.
That's quite all right. I don't need to say anything, but I will.
You know, I read through the letter. It's accurate in describing the impacts that are occurring as a result of the reduction in staff at the North County courthouse. We are coming up with some contingencies to minimize the impacts to us as a police organization. That all the North County police agencies are going to have to do business a little differently. But the important thing to realize is it's not just the police agencies that are going to be impacted by this. This is an impact to every citizen here in Brisbane as well. Essentially, if you have any dealings with the court, you're going to be making a trip down to Redwood City. Unless you're a defendant and a felony preliminary hearing, that's not the only things that are going to be conducted in South City. It's not being closed per se, as the letter points out, but essentially any business, a citizen, or even us as a police agency, we're going to be making a trip to Redwood City. So it is a big impact.
Now, who actually makes the decision about cutting the budget for this particular facility? Is that the Board of Supervisors?
The judicial branch is funded by the state.
So it's a state?
Yes. And it's not just County of San Mateo. As a result, all the counties are suffering the same problems and reduction of budget to the judiciary branch.
Okay, so I'm just thinking if we pass a resolution, to whom should we send it? And
it's Sacramento that controls the budget for the state judiciary branch.
We need to find out, probably our representatives anyway, and certainly send to the board, because I imagine they actually would agree with us, Board of Supervisors, because I know we heard a presentation from at the Council of Cities, from some of the leaders of county public safety, and they were really unhappy with the whole realignment program and everything. I have a feeling that this whole shift in the budget and the consequences for public safety and the courts is something that the supervisors would probably join with us, I imagine.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
As I say, I think that's the frustrating thing is that the budget for the courts is not controlled locally at all. So they're just kind of along for the ride at the whim of the state at this point until some things change in Sacramento.
The weird part of that, is they're also impacting San Mateo too. And they're taking away the complex litigation, I guess, portion out of the central judicial branch. And it just seems like, especially up here, that if you were going to do anything, if you have to make some cuts or something like that, you'd really want to cut in the middle so you kind of differentiate the impacts on the cities instead of just making it whack on the two northern branches. They're just not even trying to find an alignment scheme that may work. That it'll have an impact on these, but you won't have to travel as far. Like for you, if you have to go and do something, or one of your officers, in that time of day, the traffic getting there, the time city, their day is shot, especially if they're on duty, and then you've got to rearrange their schedule, and if they work night shift, it just really makes it very, very convoluted.
Well, this started 10, 15 years ago, where the budget for the courts has continually been reduced, where we used to have North County Jail where we could actually bring prisoners, and it's been quite some time where we've had to book all the prisoners in Redwood City. So we felt that once already, and now it's going to the extreme where all our business is going to be in Redwood City.
Yeah. You have to think of folks who don't have a car. Right. They live up to it. That's a huge impact. A lot of people who would have to go to the courts to, try and reduce the ticket or, have some kind of infraction that would need to be dealt with. That's quite a hardship on them. Yeah, I hope that we do some kind of letter as well.
Maybe we can kind of curtail it or put it towards our specific situation too. on the impacts that it has.
Did you look at the resolution that they provided from Daly City?
I read through the letter. I did not look through the resolution, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because I mean,
It's back at the next meeting for,
Do we have time? I mean,
well, yeah, I think this is ongoing and
There's nothing really that we can do to stop it at this point. So if you want to draft something specific in order to help in the future increase the budget, I think that's where we're at with this really at this point. The letter does kind of indicate it's kind of a save our northern court type flavor to it, but in reality, that vote is already failed.
Yeah.
So really at this point is to try to talk Sacramento into increasing that budget so we can start restoring services at some point. I think would be the goal at this point.
well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a double-edged sword because, I mean, some of the decisions that Governor Brown made with, putting, what is it, really, I'm not sure what the level of crime is, but the way he puts it into county jail instead of state prison.
yeah, that's
That is
called realignment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that impacts it even further. And then taking this away, I think, your part on the historical context of taking away the North County Detention Center was like one step, and I think you need to remind them of that because, our representatives have switched. If you recall that happened, how long ago, Bob?
That was probably close to 15 years ago.
Yeah, and there's nobody sitting there in Sacramento now, at least from on the legislative side, who has been in office 15 years ago.
Yeah, so maybe what we, as you say, Clay, is take it, and whether resolution is the proper form or not, I don't know, but we certainly want to make a number of points, and they probably are going to be a lot the same that Daly City says, but some will be different. And maybe you could draft something for us, and Commander and the Chief can take a look at it, and the City Attorney make sure it's properly in legal form. Yeah, right. Yeah, never on his way out. Yeah. Even though we got his retirement party scheduled. So anyway, I think it's clear that we'd like to make a statement, and we just have to figure out what's the best way to put it and to whom it should be sent. Okay. One other thing I wanted to report, I went to the Council of the Cities last Friday, and of course that was also a celebration of the 30th anniversary of East Palo-Alto. And the only thing to report from that is that Richard Garbarino was appointed to LAFCO to take Steppe's spot, actually.
Do you have any competition?
Yeah, there was a council member from Half Moon Bay, and they actually had a little debate. It's kind of interesting.
Oh.
Yeah, not between the candidates, but between two representatives from those two cities.
So is it close?
They didn't announce the vote. They just said we have a winner.
Oh, okay. We'll get the details later.
Yeah, we'll get the details later. Yeah. Okay. Anything else under communications? No. Okay. Well, we have oral communications number 2 for anyone who would like to speak. Seeing no request for same, we will move to adjournment, but we want to adjourn in memory of a number of important people. So do you want to talk about some of those, Clark?
Nancy Mortz, who is a longtime Brisbane resident and wife of former fire chief Dutch Mortz, and
actually he was a director of about everything. I mean, fire chief and public
harbor
works
master
and harbor master, and he was an amazing guy. Yeah, right.
Prop 13 days.
Yeah.
Chief bottle washer.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
and also Pine Tofa, and give you his spelling. That's a personal friend of mine who passed away unexpectedly last Monday. And Millbrae Vice Mayor Nadia Holliver, who also passed away at a very young age of 54, had lung cancer. And I attended her funeral too. So,
Okay. The Council of Cities had a nice little statement of memory and respect for her too. Everyone was really just, I mean, she just got elected to LAFCO. I mean,
I know.
it was just, what?
Yeah.
Nobody could believe it, yeah.
Bizarre.
yeah. Apparently she'd been ill for a long time, so.
Okay, so we will adjourn in memory of all those people. And I guess you want to do it by motion or just acclamation?
Yeah, we're just trying to stretch it out to 10:30, aren't we?
Yeah, we ought to go away. I mean, we're making it before we even have to extend.
Just say adjourn, hit that gavel.
Okay, hit the gavel. We are adjourned.